Okay, yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say one of the things that we had quite a long meeting yesterday afternoon, because the original question was how should the city look in 50 years' time, and actually after some discussion we decided to tighten the question up a bit. So you probably have noticed on the ballot paper the actual question ended up being how do we create a sustainable and resilient city in 2050. So it's sort of got the same flavour to it. It's less Newcastle specific, and it's also a bit more focused on sustainability and resilience, which we just thought would sort of help to make a bit more sense of the question. It was too big, basically, I think is what people felt. So yes, very foolishly, I agreed to sort of speak at the last minute. So I'm going to speak to two of those topics. Invest in youth. Okay, I mean that's an easy one for me because I'm very passionate about it. I mean, 20% of young people in this region are not in employment, education, or training. That's the highest in the country, and I think is pretty shocking. It's something that we should take very seriously. I mean, my feeling is that, you know, if we can't provide the opportunities both in educations and the job market for young people, then the idea that we could have any sort of sustainable or resilient future is pretty laughable. So that's where I'm coming from with this idea, and why I think it's why I'm proposing it as one of the most important ideas in terms of creating a sustainable and resilient city. I think one of the most obvious way of investing in young people is education. I would say that I'm an educationalist, if there is such a thing. Is that a word? I think it's a word. But that means much more than teaching people skills, and that's something I really want to emphasise, because it means encouraging young people to think for themselves, providing opportunities to experiment, those sorts of things, to question accepted norms. You'd probably guess I'd say that, having been running a group called The Great Debate. I like to get people to question things and to argue about things and to think about things in really broad ways. And I think that's what education is really about. And I think that young people who think for themselves are what will lead to real resilience as well. So again, it's like coming back to the focus of the question. So my proposal for investing in youth hinges on two key things on how we ensure that young people who are now not in employment, education or training don't end up having children and grandchildren who are also not in education and training in 40 years' time, which is certainly not something that we want to see, because they'll just be disenfranchised and disillusioned, and that's not where we want to be. So first of all, one of the things is to provide specific training in skills that can lead to actually doing something out in the world, whether that's making things, whether that be cars or films or stories, but actually making something, or finding work, but preferably both. But then, I mean, having said what I just said, the second is to provide educational opportunities, which I'm actually making as quite a distinct thing. So that's the opportunities to develop independent thought alongside that. And that's something, of course, that I attempt to do with my work with the Great Debate and RCE North East. But also, I mean, a lot of people here do things along those lines as well.
Caspar, that's about 4 minutes.
Is it? Right, okay. Well, I better say something about the creating wealth thing then. The time goes very quickly. I think, I mean, it links in, because my take on the creation of wealth is quite closely linked to what I've said about investing in young people. Young people are unemployed for obvious reasons. There aren't any jobs there. Our region has obviously got a proud history of production. You know, we produced ships, we produced steel, you know, all these things that actually we have a history of. A lot of that's gone, and that's one of the reasons why we have, you know, 20% of our youth in that situation. So one of the things I'm proposing is actually that part of the story does have to be making stuff. You can't just create wealth out of nothing. I know some of you will disagree with that, but that's something to sort of talk about and tease out. Because at one end of the scale we've got the absolute basics of food and shelter, and then you've got other essentials like transport and heating. And then at the other end of the scale you've got luxury goods like HD televisions and champagne, which I'm quite partial to but can't afford very much of. But this region, you know, we've lost a lot of our industry, but there's emergence of new industries, and that's something that I think is quite encouraging. If you look at Nissan and the sort of the electric cars, that's one example. There's quite a lot of work in renewable energy systems in the area as well. So, you know, if we can actually build on those things and turn those into major things, we're actually producing stuff again for a sustainable and resilient future. I think I better stop because my time's going on. I like to allow time for a question
Absolutely.
or two. That's
Sure.
the point.
So, we do have time for a question or two. Anyone want to get them clarified? I thought you let a bit of jargon go there, but never mind.
Oh yeah,
RC slipped in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just on the E1, I mean, create wealth, and I get the twist, if I'm not wrong, from your pitch for B, that actually you also exercised by the benefit from the wealth which is being created and the distribution and the equitability of that. So I was just wondering whether you could say a little bit more about that. Because creating wealth is all good and well. I know some really wealthy cities in Germany or the UK which are also at the same time at municipality level and also at social equity level, some of the poorest cities at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So wealth in itself, the generation of wealth, for me, doesn't quite do it.
Could we take the second question then? Could you
Oh
reply to
yeah,
both?
yeah, sure, yeah.
My question was, do you have any ideas, and I bet people in the room have some ideas about the kinds of jobs that maybe don't exist yet, but we really need to provide employment for young people? Do you have
So we'll take one more if I may.
Yeah.
And something I should have said but didn't. We don't have name labels, so it'd be fantastic to say who you are. So you are
Richard Cotter, I'm at Northumbria University.
Richard, thank you. And you are?
And I'm Ben Holden, I'm working on the Sentient Cities project as well.
Thank you, Ben. Could you say who you are?
Sandy Irving from the Green Party. It actually builds on the last question, and it's just to flag up the problem of jobs and joblessness. I think there is a cultural issue as well. I noticed Siemens had real problems filling their apprenticeships. They offered some really good ones to local young people, but the local young people didn't come forward to take them up. So I think there are some issues there about what people want to do.
Okay, thank you. So, Caspar, I'll give you a chance to reply to those and then we'll move on.
Okay, I've got to try and keep them in my head now. I should have taken notes. Sorry, the first question. I think there was a point to putting those two things together because I'm hinting at actually the equitable distribution of that wealth as well. It's no good if you create wealth and 3 people get rich and then you've still got 20% unemployment in the youth. So I guess it's sort of implied. I didn't make it explicit, but I hope it was implied that actually creating wealth was in order to try and distribute that to some of those who at present don't benefit from what wealth there is in the region. Maybe we can tease that out
Sure.
a bit more in the discussions, but
Thank you.
I think that answers your question. Ben's question and these two questions were linked. Can you just recapitulate?
Ideas on the kinds of jobs that don't exist yet, maybe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a great believer in all the stuff that we don't know, as it were. So I don't like be too prescriptive on that because I actually think if we're talking about 40 years in the future, I don't even know what industries there are going to be. So yes, I mean things like electric cars down the road and so on, those sorts of things. But actually, I mean, especially as with the engineering hat on, you sort of think, well, think where we were 40 years ago, and then try and picture what things we're going to be producing and what industries we're going to have and what we're going to know in 40 years' time. It's really hard to picture. So it's not very easy to be too specific about what jobs those will be. But I am talking about producing stuff, though. So, what?
The third question?
Well, it's not the cultural problem. And I've talked to many young people that you've mentioned, and you did get people skiving to go to pop idol auditions.
Mm-hmm.
But when firms like Siemens offer really generous apprenticeships in fields like renewable energy, they do have problems of actually getting young people to take up those opportunities.
Excellent. About 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, both that. I mean, actually, I think there's nothing wrong with people striving to go to pop idol. You know, at least that's aspirational. I think the pop idol's gone anyway years ago. But I don't see anything wrong with people aspiring to being pop stars. But I'm not sure about that. I mean, things have changed. I think it probably comes a bit down to John's stuff about inspiring people. If you inspire people in a future, then perhaps you can inspire people in wanting to take up an apprenticeship. You know, if people can see a future that's actually better for them through that, well, I think people perhaps aren't getting it.
Thank you. Thank you, Caspar. So now Mark is going to talk about the third option about green space later.
I have a few picture slides to help me, so I'll just load them up.